Welcome to Backstreet Gossip. News talk, current events, and political commentary. And now, here's your host of Backstreet Gossip, Ron Ludders.
Well, we're welcoming you back, and we're so happy to be with you all. Those of you that especially are on Wimpkin, all across the fruited plain, as Rush would say. Also, it's really hot in the studio, and it's really hot outside. But it must be cooler outside because some of the guests have decided to go out because it's so hot in here. And our talk is hot, too. And, you know,
hot topic.
Many of you have met our guest before, and that's Ben Wick. And we're so happy to have him because this guy...
Well, it says Arthur Cooper, though.
It does say Arthur Cooper.
Yeah,
Oh, hi,
but it's
Art.
Ben Wick.
Welcome back.
We know who you are.
Yeah. At any rate, it's Ben Wick. And so one of the things we've asked him to come here, because if you noticed one of our programs about maybe 3 weeks ago, we were really concerned about the shaman especially, and that is those people that are being held in Washington, D.C., perhaps unconstitutionally, and we wanted to see if in fact that was the case. And when we asked Ben to come on, I thought, well, nobody's going to admit to this, and I was shocked. The guy that actually reported it was Vladimir Putin, of all people.
That's right.
He's telling Biden, you have political prisoners in the country.
Yeah, imagine being reprimanded by Russia for rights that we've had.
For civil rights violations. Yeah. And this administration, it's Ray. They have absolutely no sense of pride in saying, well, we believe in the Constitution. I have a question. Do they? And we're going to find out here.
And you know, that shaman that you talk about is Jake, and I've interviewed him before. We've talked to him many times. I've seen him at the meetings. And it's just terrible that you are held, but it's not that he's just in jail. It's that he's in solitary confinement with, this is what's being reported, 1 hour out. That's cruel and unusual punishment as well.
And what has he done to
is this, I mean, what has he been charged with something more than trespassing?
As far as I know, no. And we have seen a lot of the videotapes now that have in fact been released. And here was a man that they opened the door for to let him into the Capitol. He didn't break in. They opened the door. They allowed him to go to the dais and say a prayer.
Right? They just said, be respectful.
Be respectful, and as far as we know, he has been respectful.
And I believe that the Capitol Police were also bowing their heads during the prayer. So
this is a man that probably shouldn't be, well, we'll let you decide. Go ahead.
There's so many moving parts here that are moving in the wrong direction. It's hard to know where to start. But I would say that the crux of the issue, the bottom line here, is the difference between liberty and tyranny.
Right.
All right. So that is the issue. Are we for liberty or are we for tyranny? This actually happened back in 1798, a very similar situation with the Alien Sedition Acts, and as was written, can't see that, by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison as an answer was the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, where Thomas Jefferson said that if we allow this to happen, we have turned our republic into at best, a quasi-monarchy. So in essence, that's where we are right now today in America, is we have turned our republic into a quasi-monarchy. And that is for sure what has happened. And one of the things while Ron was summarizing, one thing that just struck me that I hadn't thought of before is that every single person that participated as the Department of Justice to incarcerate these people were all in office during the Trump years. That's how bad the deep state was that he had to counter. Every single official that arrested these people, that incarcerated these people, were judges, were Department of Justice officials, were prosecutors, were law enforcement, and they were there during Trump years as well, and that's who he had to battle constantly.
And were they there prior to the Trump years through the Obama administration as well?
Yes, and that's what's called the deep state. It's a bureaucratic, technocratic, uncontrolled,
And you can't get rid of
unaccountable, unaccountable bureaucracy.
So why can't we get rid of them? Why?
Because we passed Civil Service Act, right? That they have to go through procedures in order to get rid of them. Now, there is, not to get into too much detail, but there are subtle passive ways that you can get rid of them. So the president can appoint people as the top positions. Those are appointed positions. And that person, say, the Attorney General, he would be in charge of the Department of Justice. So what he can do is say, okay, Ray, as a lifetime civil servant, I don't like the way you've been doing your job, but I'm not going to go through the firing procedure, but what I am going to do is I'm going to reassign you to the job of keeping watch over that closet over there, and we're moving your desk into there, and that's where you're going to stay for the next 4 years. So you can like it or you can lump it.
So they don't even have the ability to say, you know what, it's not working out.
No.
I don't like
No.
your job. They can't be fired.
No.
And they have full pension.
Well, they can be fired, but it's a long,
for
complicated
cause.
process.
For cause.
Yes.
Okay. Now, it seems to me, and I know that we're going to get into this, and I hate to jump ahead of it, but this is just crazy, is that you have people actually breaking the law.
Right.
They're stealing, they're looting, they're
Right.
putting government buildings on fire, they're causing harm to other individuals, and there are candidates, such as our current vice president, who are raising money for bail
Right.
so that they can come out, yet these people
Are denied bail.
they're denied bail and they're in jail.
Yes.
Now let's
How does that work?
let's just differentiate here for a minute. The people that they were raising the money for were the dissidents that were burning cities all across the United States this past summer, not this summer. They were not peaceful demonstrators that went a little crazy, but they didn't, I don't believe most of them broke many laws, unless they just going around a barricade is breaking a law. The lady Babbitt that actually was shot and killed by a person that was in the government that has still not been identified was not a threat to anybody. I mean, we talk about the use of lethal force, and you only use lethal force when your life is in danger. She did not have a gun. She was going through a broken portal there. And behind her happened to be 2 Capitol Police officers as well.
So the issue here is our First Amendment, is your right to peaceably assemble to redress grievances against the government. So how that is defined has been determined by Congress, by court decisions, that here's how you do a peaceful demonstration. So the people on January 6th believed that they were conducting a demonstration. The people in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and that town in Wisconsin, I forget the name. Kenosha, right? They were allegedly doing a First Amendment protest, all right? So the question is how do you go about doing that? And is it peaceful? And so the politics comes into play when you have the group that Ron was just describing, where they literally in Portland, Oregon, barricaded federal employees in a federal courthouse and piled pallets and lumber around the courthouse and lit it on fire to burn
they could not get out.
Federal employees to death.
Yeah. So
and none of those people are in jail right now.
So it seems like a fairly easy litmus test. I mean, the Bible describes evil as they've come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So right there, if any of those things are happening, that is evil, and evil needs to be stopped. So are you stealing?
No.
Are you killing?
No.
Are you destroying? So let's take Jake, for example. Did he steal?
No.
No. Did he kill?
No.
No. Did he destroy?
Apparently, he did not violate the instructions of the Capitol Police officers.
Okay, so we have to find out, so was it evil that he did, or was he peacefully protesting? We don't know. That's not for us to decide, but it seems like a fairly simple litmus test to say.
And therein lies the problem.
Well,
If
here,
you're-
let's just look at the two cases side by side.
Okay.
Say a Antifa thug, an Antifa citizen
Or maybe not.
in Portland, and
Of course, it was Portland. Where else?
a protester in Washington on January 6th. So you have these two individuals. All right, so let's examine. The officials in charge of Washington, D.C., number one, the head official in charge of security for that day was Nancy Pelosi. The Speaker of the House is in charge of security on the day of the vote.
Do we
Okay.
know from the government report, was she notified or was
yes,
it requested
yes. No,
that
she had a
extra
meeting.
security was needed?
She had a meeting with the chief of the Capitol Hill Police. So she had a meeting
Prior.
with them prior, and they asked for extra people, and she denied it.
Okay, so these
So,
are this is
let's-
government documents, though, right?
Right. Well,
okay.
let's just lay these things out here. Okay, so the authorities in charge of January 6th were the Capitol Hill Police,
Right.
and kind of incidentally National Guard, because evidently they were there, but they didn't do anything. Okay, in Portland, Oregon, during the protests, who are the officials in charge? Portland Police Department.
Okay.
All right. So on the one hand, in Washington, D.C., you had the Capitol Hill Police opening the doors, removing the barriers, and inviting the people in. In Portland, Oregon, the Portland Police Department were telling them to disperse, get a permit, stop lighting fires, stop throwing bricks and stuff at them, right? To my knowledge, nobody threw bricks and feces at the Capitol Hill Police or anything at them.
Now,
not even fire extinguishers.
Right. Now, we're, let me just, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this, but it's my understanding, and you probably know this from government documents, that President Trump asked for additional National Guard to be at the event because he knew that it would be a large crowd, and he wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Is that true or false?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
So if he actually was trying to create an insurrection, would he have taken the initiative to request National Guard be there so that there was nothing to happen?
Okay, not to get into too much detail on this issue, the opposition party did not trust the National Guard. They wanted all of the state commanders of the people who were there to question each individual officer to ascertain their loyalties, because they were actually afraid that they would participate. And that's why they really weren't involved in much at all.
Let me translate what he just said.
Right.
He was trying to be politically correct. The opposition party, ladies and gentlemen, was the Democrat Party. They did not want the National Guard units there because they felt that many of the guardsmen, being gun-toting people, were
Trump supporters.
Were Trump supporters.
Yeah. So
And
they were
probably
afraid that the commander-in-chief would have the
them.
troops go in and
take over the Capitol.
Okay.
That's what
So
they were
they
afraid
didn't
of.
want that.
They didn't want that, so they basically kind of shunted them off into that covered parking area.
Okay, so
Where
let's
they
go
had
back.
to sleep in a parking
So
lot
let's go
instead
back.
of
So we got Portland, we got
barracks.
Washington.
Yeah.
So you mentioned
Yes.
one thing where
the law enforcement people who were in charge of security in Washington, D.C. opened the doors, removed the barricades, and allowed people to go in to certain areas. In Portland, Oregon, the Antifa people were told to disperse because they had no permits. They were in the streets. They were committing damage to personal property of cars, as well as attacking law enforcement and law enforcement facilities. All right, so, and yet these people were arrested. Again, let's go back to the crux of the matter. These people were arrested, incarcerated, put in solitary confinement, and are still here. These people, some of whom were arrested, and they were released immediately, and if they had bail, Kamala Harris and Maxine Waters paid for their bail.
Or raised the money.
Or raised the money
Yeah.
to pay for it from their tech billionaires.
So these two scenarios, which one
Right.
came to steal, kill,
Yes.
and destroy?
Yes.
Which one? Washington?
No.
Portland.
Oregon?
Right. So here's the other thing. What we are now coming to find out is that not only were there people who were there to protest the election, but there were agitators there. One from the Antifa movement, Jonathan Sullivan, and there were several FBI, how should I say, not paid informants, paid agitators working for the FBI, who actually encouraged people to break doors down and break windows. Okay, this is in DOJ documents.
It's the government documents, right?
So we don't know yet whether there were agents with the Antifa people. Okay, my best guess is they were there working with Antifa. Personally, I believe that. Now, it hasn't come out yet, but so the people who were causing a quote unquote insurrection was the FBI paid employees.
Yeah. Okay. So given these two scenarios, right? Do we all agree that if somebody causes damage to property or person, that they should be arrested and held accountable for it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So these FBI employees, informants, working with them, organized by that, they're now in jail, right? They've been arrested?
No.
Not the informants.
In the indictments that so far, an indictment means an accusation against the people on January 6th. In the indictments, they list the names of the people being indicted, and then they have unindicted co-conspirators. An unindicted co-conspirator is somebody who was there, somebody who was conspiring to do this crime, but they are not being indicted. And every single one of those is a paid FBI or Department of Justice employee.
And they're probably not
So
in jail.
how- so
They're going home at
how-
night.
No,
They're
'cause
not in jail.
indicted. They were never arrested.
So how does for the average person, for the average citizen of the United States, knowing that we live underneath the Constitution, how is this judicial system so far off? I mean, they're picking and choosing, aren't they?
Yeah. So if you know about there was a fundraising case that occurred in Texas, and I don't remember off the top of my head the exact title of the case. Something of they were raising money for Jerusalem or Palestine. This goes back to the 1990s, right? And they indicted several groups, Islamic terrorist groups, and people went to jail for that. Well, one of the unindicted co-conspirators was an organization that raised several $100,000 for this cause. But because they were an unindicted co-conspirator, they are classified on the terrorist watch list. So I want these FBI paid employees to be also put on the terrorist watch list.
Because it seems, they're
unindicted co-conspirators as well.
There's a show that we have here on Hub Radio Phoenix called Teddy and the Rough Riders. And one of President Roosevelt's famous quotes was, "No one is above the law, but nobody is below the law." And it seems to me that they're picking and choosing
Yes.
how we want to indict or fulfill the current laws on the books.
Right. That's why President Putin called them political prisoners. This is a completely 100% political act. It has nothing to do with criminal activity because, yes, some windows were broken, some doors were broken, possibly a chair or two were broken. According to the documents that were filed, there was $1.5 million worth of damage done to the Capitol building.
$1.5 million.
Yes.
It seems like a lot, right?
Well, you have to understand how much they pay for desks and chairs in Congress.
Well, probably as much as they pay for a hammer.
Yes.
$500
Yes.
folding chair.
So needless to say, the damage that was done last summer in Portland, Seattle, of the other protesters ran into the 20-some million dollars worth of damage.
Oh, I think it's a lot
And
more than millions.
Only one
It was
person.
over $1 billion in the country. Not just.
Yeah.
We're not just talking Portland, but
Right.
the entire
Yes.
operation.
Yeah. So
was
one
over $1
person
billion.
died on January 6th because of this. From what I understand, at least 26 people have died because of the Antifa Black Lives Matter protests. 26
Now, when you say
people,
that one
and
person-
200 people were injured, as well as hundreds of police officers who were injured.
So when you say one person died on the 6th, was that the person that was shot
Yes,
by the Capitol
that
Police?
was Ashley Babbitt.
All right.
There were several people who died later because of health problems.
Not related to this
Well, they
incident.
were related in that they were in a
Stressful situation.
A stressful situation, and it was very crowded. And people who have certain health problems shouldn't put themselves in those situations.
But let me just say this. There was a rumor that was brought out by the Capitol media that one of their officers was hit with a fire
The
extinguisher.
New York Times
Was it
put
the
that
New York
out.
Times?
Fire extinguisher.
Hit with
Yes.
a fire extinguisher and
Nick
it killed him.
Sick.
That is not
He
true.
was bludgeoned to death.
It is
Right.
not true.
No.
It didn't happen. Never
No,
happened.
he had 2 strokes.
Now,
And
let's go. Let me just
Yes.
tell one other thing. I hate to interrupt you right in the middle of this because this is one of my big pet peeves. That gal, Ashley Babbitt, was murdered, and they still will not allow anybody to know who did it. They say this was an armed insurrection, but they found no arms in anybody that was
Right.
at the Capitol other than the Capitol Police and some legislators.
Okay,
You know-
so let's just get back to, let's just summarize this. So, hundreds of, I would say, up almost $100 million worth of damage here, 1.5 million damage here. There were weapons used here. They actually had rifles. They actually shot people here, right? They shot and murdered people, the Antifa and Black Lives Matter people. Over here, no weapons were found, all right? Over here, almost 100 people are still in jail. Here, no one is still in jail. Here, people are not being allowed bail. They're not being allowed lawyers to get them out on habeas corpus. Now, they're not being allowed to face a judge to be. They have not even been accused.
Wow.
And we'll get into all of the reasons why this has happened. Over here, they had lawyers paid for by the government. They had bail provided for them. They were released, and not much. Slap on the hand.
And it seems to me that they, on the other side, the Portland side, were in a way encouraged to continue doing what
Yes,
they did
yes.
for a prolonged period of time.
Yes, and the persons that were encouraging them to do that, number 1 was Kamala Harris. Number 2, Maxine Waters. Number 3, the Squad. And the thing is, where was I going with this? So these things are happening, and getting back to the so many people died here, and one person died here, and as Ron said, they're not identifying the person. However, there's 10,000 videos that are not being allowed to be shown.
Well, they're identifying the person who was killed,
Right.
but not the person who
Yes,
pulled the trigger.
And I watched 3 videos that were up and I'm not sure if they still are. One of them actually was taken by that John Sullivan guy, he was actually egging her on to go through the window. And the window was already broken. She did not break the window. She did not break any doors. She was just happened to be in front, and they were kind of like pushing her. I saw at least 3 police officers standing right next to her, who at any point in time could have told her stop or grabbed her to prevent her. They did nothing to stop her.
All right.
And wait, I want to tell you who shot her. I'm going to tell you who shot her.
Okay.
Okay? I'm going to tell you who shot her.
This is breaking news.
All you have to do is do some research. All right? And so I watched that video several times, and she is up in the window with her hands on both sides and her foot on the thing, and she's lifting herself up, and an arm comes across and the shoulder comes out from one of the doorways and points point blank right at her and shoots her. And that arm is an African-American arm, and it has lieutenant markings on it. That was a African-American lieutenant in the Washington Capitol Hill Police. So how many of those are there? So if there's 1, we know who it is. If there's 2, we know it's one of the 2. If there's 3, we know it's one of the 3. Do your research. Look at that guy's uniform. It's a lieutenant in the Capitol Hill Police who's an African American.
And it came from behind a door?
Right.
Yes, he was.
So what does that mean?
He said he was afraid for his life.
Behind a door?
Yes.
With an unarmed woman coming through a
Right.
window?
And police officers behind
On both
her.
sides of her.
So he had to be a pretty good shot not to hit one of the other officers.
No, he would have had to been a really bad shot. I mean, it was
How
almost,
far away was he?
The gun that I saw was maybe 4 or 5 feet away from her.
Okay.
I mean, he shot her at point blank range. That's why when I saw that happen, the first thing I thought in my mind was that man just murdered her.
Yeah.
And he did.
He murdered her.
Of course, the first thing you say, I was fearful for my life, because that is the litmus test for firing and shooting at somebody.
Right.
Is I was afraid.
And
for
if
my
that
life.
lieutenant in the police department was afraid for his life, he never should have been a police officer, because if he was scared of that woman,
Well, who was surrounded
5'1",
who was surrounded
110
by
pounds, surrounded by other officers in
Right.
his department.
What would she have had to do to threaten his life?
I have no idea.
Wow.
What could she have done
The
when he
guy-
had his gun out? There
guy
was
just-
nothing she could have
And
done.
you know, I mean, if you take any defense courses, especially with firearms, you know that you would command somebody if you felt threatened. Stop! I have a gun. I can use it. Don't come any closer to me. There's ways before you pull the trigger. The last thing you want to do is pull the trigger.
Well, a lot of police departments don't tell their officers not to do that. Number one, and number two.
I see it all the time where they're commanding, stop, I'm going to shoot you, stop, don't come any
Well,
further.
If you take the courses, which you would think if you were a police officer, you've certainly taken courses.
No, but you see,
in
I mean,
gun
you see
etiquette.
these on videos
Right.
where they're saying, stop, don't come any
And
closer,
that's what they're
put the
supposed to
knife
be.
down, put the axe down. I mean, you see it over and over again.
Yeah, but it is what it is. So it is happened. So the question is, why are these people free and these people in jail? It is a complete 100%
The dual
political thing.
judicial system.
Now, again, the people who arrested these people and put them in jail,
Don't
right,
tap
and
on
are
the
running.
table.
Oh,
See the sign?
the people who arrested these and are holding these people in jail and are indicting them are the same people who did the same thing here and released them. They work for the Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice. These are the same people who tried to impeach Donald Trump.
All right, so let's say that's true. To what end?
So here's the deal. Again, going back to the Alien Sedition Acts of 1798 and the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, which they were countering this, saying that this is tyranny. Eventually, rather than take it to court, they repealed the Alien Sedition Acts because they jailed 25 newspaper publishers in 1798 and held them without bail, without trial, indefinitely for months at a time. And they suspended the writ of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus says that another person can appeal your incarceration and have you brought before a judge to be accused. And you're supposed to, under normal conditions, be allowed in 48 hours to do this. So that was the Alien Sedition Act in 1798. And now we have what's called the Patriot Act that was re-upped, I believe, in 2011. And it should be up for re-upping soon. But the way things are going, they're going to re-up it. But the Patriot Act gives them the right to hold an American citizen without bail, deny them the writ of habeas corpus, and deny them every single human right as well as civil right as well as inalienable right. What they are doing is just, the Patriot Act in this regard is 100% unconstitutional. And as we've seen, as Ron pointed out, is most of the federal judges are very suspect. Number one, they rarely take classes on the Constitution. Their classes on the Constitution, all they do is study other judges' opinion on the Constitution. They don't actually read it for themselves. I would say that in order to become a federal judge, you ought to be able to stand up and quote the Constitution. In fact, as disappointed as I am, I know Amy Coney Barrett actually did that a few times with some of the questions of the senators. But she's been a huge disappointment. And, you know, we have allowed ourselves to be snookered and say, well, these people are pro-life and they're anti-abortion, so let's vote for that judge. Well, okay, so 1 out of 100. The other 99, they suck. And the judges don't believe, the judges currently, federal judges currently, unless they're over 85 years old, and still in office, do not believe that there's a higher law than what they say it is. And this is the way they've been trained since the progressive movement. Oliver Wendell Holmes, when he was on the court, they are trained to believe that the law is what the judges say it is. And this is just basically that you might as well kiss the republic goodbye. When you say that, as Thomas Jefferson said, if we allow 5 justices to decide what is the law, we have turned our republic over to the oligarchy of that eminent tribunal.
And that was one of the main concerns far before taxation without representation is judicial overreach.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why they signed the Declaration of Independence.
And where they came out of the feudal system in Europe, and under the feudal system of Europe, the ruling monarch, whether it be a king, a duke, or a count, not only were they the executive branch, but they were the legislative branch, and they were the judicial branch. So they wrote the law, they acknowledged the law as the sovereign, and then they adjudicated the law. They were the judge that you were brought before.
Now,
And that's why we had our separation of powers, to prevent that.
You know, many people don't know this, but they think that the Supreme Court is a lifetime appointment. But as you know, and as we've said many times on this program, is that it is for good behavior. And there have been cases where these judges, Supreme Court judges, have been removed. One was for drunkenness, because they were drunk, not in public, but in their own home, and they said,
judge, yes.
Yeah, it is unbefitting of a Supreme Court judge to be drunken at any time. Second, a judge said that a law passed through Congress was unconstitutional. Congress came back and said, who are you? We are the elected officials. You are now no longer a Supreme Court judge. So historically, and Wall Builders is a great resource.
That's impeachment of judges.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's if you go to Wall Builders, David Barton, you can learn all about this, and your eyes are going to be open because you're going to say, "Wait a second, nobody ever told me this." But you'll find out about the actual Constitution and what it means.
There's one other thing that I think is important. You know, their decisions are called opinions,
Right.
and I believe it was Andrew Jackson at one time. They said, well, this is the Supreme Court's decision. He says,
Opinion.
or opinion. And he said, well, fine, that's not my opinion, and I'm not going to listen to your opinion.
Yeah, and he said they could say whatever they want me to do, but I'd like to see them make me do it.
Yeah.
And
I control them. I'm the commander-in-chief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got the army behind me.
Yeah, and they definitely are not rulings. When you start saying that what a judge decides is a ruling, you have just said that you are in a quasi-monarchy.
Right. Because it's an opinion.
Or a decision.
But they are, but people do use that term synonymously,
Yes.
saying it's a ruling, a decision and a ruling are the same.
Yeah. But it's not a law. A
No.
law is something that is duly passed by a legislative body and signed by the executive branch. Now, what they'll say is, well, it has the force of law. They have de facto law, which is something that was passed, and de jure law, which is adjudicated, right? Well, here's the thing. Last time I checked, no judge wears a uniform other than a black robe. They don't have law enforcement powers, right? They can't incarcerate anybody. They can't arrest anybody. They have no enforcement act. The people that enforce what judges say are law enforcement officers. That's why it's so important with oath keepers and the constitutional sheriffs, is because they can tell the courts, no, just like Sheriff Mack did, no, we are not going to do that in this county. And that's what needs to happen more and more.
All right, so Defensive Marriage Act signed by President Clinton, is that still in effect?
Who knows?
The Defensive Marriage Act
Yes.
signed by
Yes.
Congress
Yes.
and by the
That
president.
is still the law of the land.
All right. How about the decision on gay marriage? Is that the law of the land?
No, that is not a law.
It's not a law.
That is an opinion by 5 justices.
But they said that that is now the law of the land, and people are moving accordingly. Whether or not you believe in it or not, we're just
And that's
deciding here,
only because-
is it a law or
Yes.
is it not a law?
That's only because they're being manipulated by the media and propagandized and censored when you
Okay.
have a dissenting
Okay,
opinion.
we've got the music playing, and we're going to have to take a break here. And when we come back, I think you're going to be very, very pleased with our guests. And I want to make an announcement. I'm going to make it now. I was going to make it after the break. Jay Lawrence is back on the radio, and he's on Hub Radio. He used to be on KTAR. Used to listen to him every Saturday night. He now has the Jay Lawrence Show right here on Hub Radio. We'll see you on the other side. Do not go away, because we've got some really wonderful young ladies coming in the building. See you on the other side.